Welcome to the knife show. I'm so bad at this. Oh gosh. Okay. Fourth time's the charm.
The fourth time.
Welcome to the knife show, where we dissect the human psyche and society. My name is Joyce, and I'm tired.
My name is Denzel. I am also tired. But today we will be discussing darkness and exploring that inner darkness, or shining a light on that inner darkness. What does it mean for you to explore darkness?
What it means to explore darkness is to look at the shadow. So, Carl Jung talks about the shadow. And so it's the side of you that is unconscious to some extent, but also has a lot of darkness because it hasn't been looked at. It's almost like the part of the forest where there's not light there. And so there's darkness. It's almost like the parts of you that are more hidden, the parts of you that may not be as acceptable socially or acceptable in general, because it has an element that is not completely positive and good vibes. It's like the part of you that's the opposite of good vibes.
Interesting. Do you think that darkness in a person is always a good thing? Or that's probably too easy of a question. But what percentage of the time do you think that somebody's inner darkness is a bad thing?
I think someone's inner darkness can be a bad thing when it goes unchecked. So when it's a darkness that was okay and then turned really dark. For instance, someone who used to look at legs and then think that, oh, they're pretty. And then one day they became a cannibal because they thought that they looked very delectable and
I'm guessing we're not talking about KFC legs here, are we?
It's like dark things, they start off innocent. So it's this part of you that you don't have a chance to sort out, so it becomes ultra dark. So it's almost like a bad seed that goes unchecked turns into a tree that kills society with its darkness.
Gotcha. I'm picturing an evil tree right now, just walking around swinging its branches, killing everyone in society. Take this for oxygen.
Poisonous fruit, okay? It's apples, but apples that kill you.
Ooh, I see. Yeah. How do you like them apples? Okay. Oh, okay, I feel that.
Because I'm tired.
So, okay, my last question on that, before I take you off the spot, is, so as you said, there's the darkness of looking at somebody's legs and then eventually becoming a cannibal. Where would the average person has darkness in them, right? Where would you say that, like you said, like darkness becomes unchecked, like, or it becomes bad when it becomes unchecked? How do you know when now it's gotten to the point where it's unchecked? And how do we check it, And which is, I think that's what we're going to be unpacking for the rest of the video. But
you know that it's unchecked when you start to become harmful to society or yourself or someone. So if you're causing suffering, whether it's upon yourself, another person, or any type of soul, it's something that you need to look at. because now it's affecting other people. It's not only darkness that is imaginary or just affects no one. It's
Mm,
something that's now a plague that's going to attack everyone.
mm, mm,
It's almost like darkness is kind of like falling in love. It
mm.
happens slowly and then all at once. As yeah,
Then it swallows you.
and
Okay.
it follows you.
Okay. Oh, that I see. All right. I'll throw my stabs out here. I agree with you. I feel like darkness, like obviously, it comes in like different depths of sheer. So I think that when we are talking about darkness, there's like the extreme levels, such as maybe someone like Jeffrey Dahmer, who did go to very extreme levels of darkness, and it started with while he was a young kid. Then strange things like, oh, that's interesting. Like you went fishing and you peeled the scales in this way on a live fish. Interesting, and or you watch certain types of pornography. And I know that everybody has their kinks, but there's a few of them that it's kind of like, okay, that we need to keep an eye on you. And so I think that there's levels of that type of darkness that then start to develop over time, and just like what you said, like we have to be able to keep that in check. But some people could watch and be like, yeah, well, I don't have that type of darkness. But I think that darkness is another thing that you said, which is almost like anything that society might look at as like unapproved for whatever reason, and this changes from different cultures. So then it's almost like, is darkness relevant? And that's a question that I feel like is probably worth exploring. Like somebody's like inner darkness is already like an abstract thing, but like is that like a relevant kind of thing, like, or does it depend on who might have, or where it's being presented in some case? Which, if you want to take a stab at that, I would like to hear your take.
I think there are different shades of darkness. So there's the quirky type of darkness, which is actually sometimes fine. It's just like a interesting. This is like the side of you that no one sees that you're a little ashamed of, but it's actually okay and it doesn't actually do anything bad. And then there's the dark darkness where it starts from a seed of pain or it starts from a seed of unmet need. And so they try to meet their needs in a really messed up way. It's kind of like pedophilia. Your need for love maybe wasn't met in a certain way, or weird feelings that now you associate with kids. They all start off from I'm a naive NF, so I have a very like woo woo take on it, but I believe that it starts from the seeds of unmet needs. So I think things that become really horrible come from actually a very innocent place, is my belief with everything.
Yeah, no, actually, I agree with you there, and I think that that's why the whole point of this video is, yeah, to explore that darkness, because I think that darkness, I often see it as like being able to be compared to um, like dragons. I often tell clients of mine that we're often told to slay our inner dragons, but how about taming them? I think that, so this is going to be like, I'm going to start off very abstract and metaphorical, but then I'm going to like try to ground it. So an example could be like, if you have dragons in your dungeon, then you should be able to go down into your dungeon and over time familiarize yourself with each of those dragons. Don't jump right away to slaying them, because you might be doing yourself a disservice. Rather, take time to understand them, take time to try to befriend them, and again, like, tame them. Eventually, after you've become familiar enough with those dragons and you're able to walk through that dungeon and not be as afraid, now you start inviting a friend, a very close friend, and then you start inviting like maybe a few close friends and get them acclimated to the dragons. Let the dragons be able to understand, within a very confined and close like headquarters or like whatever, um, what it's like to hang out with other human beings, and have them be able to become accustomed to that, because that's a slice of society. After some time where they get acclimated enough to human contact and human interaction, then you'd be able to take those dragons eventually out of the dungeon, and you're able to fly them around town, which is something that you would have never been able to do if had not you had taken the patience, to, instead of just like slaying them all right away, you took time to be able to um, understand them, and see that, okay, this dragon is not inherently evil. It just needs some direction, just like, even in some movies, like, okay, this kid is not really a bad kid. They have some bad behaviors, but if we focus enough on this kid that we're adopting or whatever it might be, and we give him a little bit of guidance, we give her a little bit of guidance, who knows? They might evolve into something that's just really beautiful and even able to like change the world. And so I think that that's something that, once we begin to try to understand within ourselves, then we could really utilize, to integrate more into ourselves in general. So, like I said, I'm gonna like try to like ground that. There are certain types of traces of darkness, seeds of darkness that we could probably like find like within us. And like I said, it's all like very my my roommate's daughter just talks so loud, and it's like, so I don't know if it can be heard over here, but it's just like sometimes it's like so distracting. I'm like, wow, how can somebody talk so loud all the time? But anyway, um yeah, so like I was saying, I think that, when you she made me lose my train of thought.
It's
When it comes to actually like bringing this into like a very tangible form, there's different levels of darkness that we have, and therefore, because we have like different levels of like darkness and all of that, then, we if you see that you have in you an ability maybe to like, I don't know, an idea of like, darkness could be like you have anger problems, like once you get like really angry, then you don't know what might happen. Maybe if you really check into that darkness, if you try to familiarize yourself with that dragon, you'll realize that it's not really anger, but it's coming out as anger. But what that really is, once you learn to understand it, tame it, and integrate it to who you are, because the darkness is a part of you, then you might realize like, no, this is not anger, it's passion. And passion is not a bad thing. Anger isn't even a bad thing. When it's uncontrolled, then yeah, sure, like it's like a fire that consumes everything. But fire is not a bad thing, as we learned from Avatar: The Last Airbender. Like it could be used in so many different ways. It doesn't just destroy everything. So I think in the same sense, like, when you realize like, okay, no, I have like anger problems in this way, it's like, no, no, no. Let me further get to understand this dragon, tame it, all of that. And then you realize like, no, this is not anger, this is passion. Um, Maybe if you have, I don't know, like even like a cheating problem, it's like that type of darkness. It's like, okay, let's explore that. What's really going on over here? And then you realize like, oh, this is not really like an inherent like, oh, cheating, like I want to sleep with all of these other men, I want to sleep with these other women, like whatever. But it's maybe like a desire just for deeper intimacy, or like a variety of relationships, and it's just like, okay, maybe that's why it's like now we have people who are poly in nature, that are able to like, be like they're practicing it at least, and they're able to like be in that way. If you have a darkness that has to do with like drinking, like you're getting drunk, it's like, all right, that's something that, once again, like, what's causing this? Like, once everything seems to have like a root of some sort, and once you start familiarizing yourself with that root, then you can find where it's at, and you can find a different way to groom it and tame it to bring it elsewhere. Because again, I feel like that's a part of you, that you shouldn't necessarily destroy, but you also should keep from growing in a bad direction that'll harm other people and yourself.
Very well said, Denzel. So, darkness can kind of be compared to the nine-tailed fox that Naruto has within him. And so sometimes the nine-tailed fox can come out and cause a lot of reckoning, or it can really help the people around you, depending on how you channel it. So, darkness is poorly handled strength almost sometimes. It's like maybe it was a good thing, but now it too much of it creates a darkness. With anger, for instance, what Denzel was saying, sometimes it's your anger is an emotion of passion to want to change something. It's a desire to kind of use this emotion to create some sort of change. But if it's too much, it just becomes a little how do you say it? It's unhinged anger becomes dangerous anger, but righteous anger is needed to make real change. So it's not the inherent thing itself that is wrong, it's just the use of it that might have a better way of being handled. With our darkness, you can't really cut it off completely like what Denzel was saying, because if you do, it's not going to leave most of the time. It's just going to be like a lizard with its tail being cut off, and then it's just going to grow a tail back again because it's still a part of you. As long as the lizard is alive, the tail is going to grow back because it's regenerative. Your darkness is the same thing. As long as you're alive, if you try to cut off your darkness, the tail will just grow back. And that's because the root of the darkness was never solved, because the root always comes from an innocent place. In my NF ideal world, it does. And what I mean by that is, let's say you did something because you desired to be seen. Maybe your inner child wanted to be seen, so you became angry because you're like, if I'm not angry, then I can't make this inner child that's hurt be seen. Well, if you just stop being angry, you're going to have this weird urge in you to always kind of like, you're going to be this pent up energy of anger, and it's going to cause some resentment that you have to hold this part of yourself down. But maybe if there's the root that was tackled, like, oh, the anger was there because there's an inner hurt child within you that wanted to fend for other people who you thought were getting hurt in the same or similar way. If you found out that it was really a part of you that was innocent, longing to be heard or seen or to have their needs met a little more, then maybe you can meet that need in a different way. And maybe it's a healthier way. So you're going to have to figure out a way to meet that need, but in a different form. If darkness is to truly leave, then it has to be modified. It's almost like if you're going to quit something, there are steps to take to quit, and sometimes you have to replace it with something. So let's say someone is a chronic drinker, like they drink a lot, and maybe that comes from some sort of trauma that they've dealt with when they were younger. Maybe there's a pain that they're avoiding, so drinking helps them and they took it too far. One of the ways to make maybe the transition out of their darkness, so what I define as darkness is something that actually is ruining your life or someone else's life in some way. If it gets to that point, then I think a way to transition out of that is to replace it with something. So instead of drinking, maybe replacing that with social interaction. So really like connecting to a supportive group. And so your darkness transforms instead of being silenced. Because that's like what permanent change is to me. It's transformation and transmutation. You kind of have to be an alchemist, like Denzel talked about in one of his videos, and you have to alchemize the darkness into something else. You can't just completely get rid of it because it's a part of you, and it won't leave just because you're like hocus pocus, banished. That doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that's really big. Especially having grown up as a Christian and everything. When you talk about darkness in the like, if you think of darkness as like sin, for example, um, as a Christian, we're told to try to like destroy, abolish that sin in a way, like try to get rid of it. And I remember like, like when I was growing up, especially like, then I had this like I knew that like okay, Jesus has died for my sins, so like I'm already cleansed through Jesus's blood and everything, but that doesn't mean that I should just continue doing whatever I want, whatever to displease God. So I have to make sure that I am continuously trying my best to like live in a way that pleases him. And so that would mean like, fighting against my natural human desire to sin, which is pretty much do anything that goes against God's instruction biblically. And from that, when you look at people like in the Bible, such as like Paul, who literally used to say like he said something on lines of like, why do I do the things that I don't want to do and I don't do the things that I want to do? And then he's like, oh, I realize it's not really me. It's like the sin that's in me. So it's almost like this darkness that's like just been gnawing at me, but like it's part of my human nature. And just like what Joyce said, like it unfortunately, even the Bible says itself, like, this is not a part of you that you can just be cut off. Like, so as Christians, Christians believe that you can never completely like become sinless. You can never not sin. As long as you're human, you will always sin. Maybe you went 2-3 days without sinning, but you're gonna still sin soon. And the only time that you will no longer sin or have that drive, that proclivity or that impulse to sin anymore will be once either Jesus comes back or you die and go to heaven, which is now the sanctification process or the restoration. Like now that that fallen nature of mankind, according to the Bible, is no longer like a thing because God has restored you to the original way that he intended for human beings to be, which is without sin. But until that happens, according again to like the Bible, you are always going to still sin. Like it's just gonna naturally happen because again, like you're human. And again, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't fight against it, but it's a lizard's tail. Like cut it off, just keep on growing back. So that whole thing, like I used to literally try to get rid of sins. And like I mean, for the most part, like I'd say like I did like really great. Like when I was a kid, I used to steal a lot and I used to be like a really, really, really like just big liar. I don't know why, I don't remember, but my parents just said like, yeah, Denzel, like you would just lie for no reason. Like, and I'm just like, wow. Somebody told me recently that it's the way that a child practices creativity. So you know what? That was my way of taming my that was really what my dragon was. It wasn't necessarily lying. It was a Hermes archetype that's just trying to find his way about creativity and imagination. And I had to tame that. That's what I'll tell myself. But I came to a point where I really did like I would I became so I detest lying so much now that I refuse to do it. I will find loopholes. I will try to avoid questions. But if I'm asked directly and everything, like it's my integral thing to like, no, I do not want to lie. So I will just say whatever the truth is. And that's I feel like a dragon that maybe if I didn't slay, it's more that I've tamed it, so now it won't come out as lying, but now it does come out more in like creativity and my ability to be able to fabricate stories and stuff of that nature. And I've put that energy into a different direction as opposed to deceiving people. Stealing, I used to steal all the time and everything like that. Honestly, I that's the second thing that I really really just hate. Like I do not steal. Like it's just something I'm really against, along with lying. Personally, I don't know. I know I've tamed that dragon, or I've probably actually slayed that dragon. I don't know how I may have tamed it and what it would become. But either way, it's something that I've tried to abolish or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, because darkness, quote unquote, would still so I thought to myself, okay, I'm about to be without sin. God, I don't lie, I don't steal, I don't murder people. I haven't been having I haven't been sleeping around before marriage, all this other stuff. So it's just man, so if you could actually just help me with this one last thing, God, that I'm dealing with, then I would be low-key perfect. Because there's just one tree and then it has branches from it that is the last source in my garden of darkness. And I used to always be confused, why, as much as I cut down that tree, it just keeps on growing back. I cannot, I fast, I pray, what the heck? And it's just what Joyce said. It's as long as I am human, no matter how hard I try, I just cannot, I will not be able to keep from sinning. And again, I don't mean this to be a preachy thing, but I'm using this kind of as a way to show how even the most holy of people, and everybody knows this, Christians or whoever, there's always even they are not perfect, so it's but even people who are really trying to be without blemish and everything, you cannot cut off that dark side of you. So you learn to embrace it, and when you embrace it, you tame it. You don't embrace it in a way that's like Ted Bundy and you lean into it and it's all right, you just let it overtake you, but you find a way to tame it, because you see that, okay, you have to be honest and real with yourself. And I think that's the biggest thing. You have to be able to be honest and real and admit to yourself, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what it is. And I think that that's one of the biggest things too that we are missing in society, spaces where, kind of what I was saying, bringing people, who can you bring down into your dungeon to be able to meet these dragons of yours, before they're able to come out into society. Before you're able to bring those dragons out into society, they have to become acclimated to human beings. And who can you trust to bring down into your dungeon? And it's sad that I feel we live in a society a lot of times where we don't really have that kind of trust. Somebody sees they hear a little roar, it's what was that? And then they're running, and I mean, I understand, certain things are just red flags, certain dragons are bigger than others, but I think that it is nice when you can have people that you can share your struggles with, that you can share your flaws with, that you can share your vulnerabilities, your inner dark spots, and that'll help just keep you in check in some way, shape, or form. Because again, you can never really cut that off completely. But if you learn to get it under control, if you can learn how to address it, if you can learn to become honest about it, and then see how you can tame it, I think that that's where you're going to get the absolute best from understanding yourself and your inner darkness.
I believe that darkness is a solution to a problem. So there's some sort of problem maybe in a person's life, an emptiness, a void, a hurt, a pain. You maybe an example is the movie The Joker. It shows how Joker became Joker. He's actually a really good guy, and he was just put into a really poor circumstance. And the Joker came out of a seed of as a solution to a problem. So maybe there was some emptiness, some unmet needs in his life, and then it became this huge thing that spirals out of control. It's kind of like a snowball at the top of a hill, slowly coming down the hill becomes a bigger and bigger snowball and becomes a boulder sized snowball, and then becomes a force of nature to be reckoned with. And then it kind of bulldozes over everything that's down the hill. And so everything starts off small and then becomes a huge problem after. And darkness is a slippery slope. It starts off in a small way, becomes a big thing. It's almost like partners and cheating. And so like at the beginning, maybe it was just a dissatisfaction, and then it becomes a actual legitimate thing where someone's hiding secrets from the other one. But oftentimes it's a solution to a problem that wasn't able to find a true resolution. It grows into a darkness. So I believe that our souls seek to be heard. So if we don't actually listen to our soul and we act like everything's fine, your actions will eventually reflect the true state of how you're actually feeling, no matter how much you deny it. So our darkness is also a side of ourselves in which a lot of people are in denial of sometimes. And sometimes that creates bigger problems, because if you deny darkness too long, it festers and it festers and it festers. And then it becomes this fungal growth in the being of your skin or something. And so what I'm trying to say is that darkness is the sign that you need love there sometimes. I'm an NF, so I think everything can be solved with love. I didn't realize the extent of my empathy for people until we talked about darkness, and I realized that my first impulse when I see someone's darkness, as long as it's not like sociopathic darkness, is empathy. So I go like, why is this darkness there? What problem is it trying to solve? What need in you is empty? And I'm like, wow, I am an empath. I didn't know that. Great.
And not everybody has the capability to do that. That's why, like, earlier, like when I said, some people, they hear like the roar from the dungeons, like, what was that? And then they hit deuces, like they're like, oh no, I gotta go. And I don't blame them. But if you are somebody who's like able to do that, then your gifts could help tremendously with the people around the world. I feel like when you have such people and they have like such outlets in that way, the world is already like a very unfortunate, like unsafe place in many ways. There are like lots of really, terrible crimes and things like that that are done. Thankfully, though I feel like there's less of that because we have people who hold space for and try to diffuse the darkness by bringing light to it. And darkness cannot reside where light is, because darkness is only the absence of light. So when you put light to it, then you allow the darkness to be able to be transformed, to be alchemized. And who knows what that'll turn into. So yeah, thank you for watching, and make sure that you leave comments, questions, concerns, and until next time, stay
Stay
sharp.
sharp.
またよ